Welcome to the Business English Podcast. I'm Rob, and today we're tackling one of the most nerve-wracking challenges in the professional world, especially if English isn't your first language: performance reviews and appraisals. Even the most seasoned professionals can feel uneasy when it's time to sit down with the manager and discuss what they've achieved, where they need to improve, and how they plan to grow. Now, let's take a moment to talk about our man Charlie. He's originally from Italy and now works in a bustling London office as a marketing specialist. Charlie's manager has just sent him an email confirming his annual performance review. And while he's confident about the results he's delivered, he's nervous about describing them in English. Sound familiar? Maybe you felt the same. The pressure to sound professional, humble, and ambitious all at once can be overwhelming, especially when you're searching for the right words in a second language. In today's episode, we'll explore the exact phrases and structures you need to shine in that high-stakes conversation. We'll cover everything from self-evaluation, like highlighting your biggest wins without sounding arrogant, to responding graciously to feedback. We'll also share ways to set actionable objectives for the future and request support if you need extra resources or guidance. Think of it as your personal roadmap to mastering performance reviews in English. But here's the thing. Sometimes it's not enough to just memorize a few phrases. You've also got to avoid those common pitfalls we so frequently discuss on the podcast. Things like stumbling through vague statements or appearing too defensive when you hear tough feedback. Wondering how Charlie manages to stay poised under the spotlight? We'll reveal his strategies later in the show. So, if you want to feel composed, credible, and confident in your next performance review, stay tuned, because by the end of this episode, you'll have everything you need to turn what could be a stressful conversation into a powerful chance to shine. Let's dive in. Okay, let's begin by talking about why it's absolutely essential to have the right communication tools in your pocket when performance review season rolls around. In fact, mastering this skill set can completely change how managers and colleagues perceive you, especially if English isn't your first language. Later, I'll share a simple trick that can help you stand out in these reviews, even if you usually feel nervous or uncertain. Curious? Well, we'll come on to that soon. But firstly, let's set the scene. Performance reviews are high stakes, let's face it. They can impact your career growth, future projects, and even your salary. So, being able to communicate your strengths and challenges in a clear, confident manner is a game changer. Think about it. You want to make sure the person sitting across from you really understands what you've done well this year and that you're open to learning from any setbacks. If you're vague, they might walk away feeling like you haven't made much of an impact at all, or worse, they might question whether you're truly ready for a bigger role. Let's consider a few scenarios to show why the right phrases and tone matter. One scenario is self-evaluation. You want to highlight your most significant achievements without sounding like you're bragging. Another scenario is responding to feedback. Maybe a colleague or your manager points out something you need to work on. Knowing how to respond with diplomacy can go a long way in showing you're a team player. Then there's setting future objectives. You'll likely need to discuss what you plan to do next and how you'll get there. Finally, don't forget the importance of requesting support. If you need extra training, resources, or a mentor, you have to ask for it in a way that emphasizes your commitment to growth. So why does all this matter so much? Well, because when you show up to a performance review prepared to speak in clear, actionable language, you send a powerful message. You're serious about your career, you're a proactive communicator, and you're ready to step up. And here's what I find most exciting. Once you get comfortable with these skills, it doesn't just help you in appraisals. You can use this same professional language to shine in big presentations, client meetings, or even quick updates with your boss. Stay tuned because up next, I'll be revealing how to form these key phrases step by step. And I'll also share how Charlie, our Italian marketing specialist, manages to turn potential weaknesses into strengths just by tweaking his language a tiny bit. So, let's dive in. Now, before we dive into these powerful phrases for performance reviews and appraisals, I want to give you a quick heads up. If you're hungry for more professional language tips, sign up for our weekly newsletter, the 3-Minute Minutes. It's packed with bite-sized resources to elevate your business communication skills. And you'll also get a transcript for an episode, so you won't miss a thing. Now, let's get straight into the specific language you can use to make the most of your self-evaluation, feedback discussions, future objectives, and support requests. Feel free to repeat the phrases out loud right after me. This will help cement your pronunciation and improve your confidence. And if you're curious about how these expressions can transform your professional image, keep listening. We'll uncover a simple twist later that can make your delivery sound even more natural. Language for self-evaluation. Phrase 1. I have consistently met my targets in. I've consistently met my targets in. Imagine you're pointing to a specific project or task, like marketing campaigns or client outreach. If you want to make an even stronger statement, add a time frame like, I have consistently met my targets in Q1 and Q2 this year. Consistently suggests reliability over time, which shows your manager you're not just a one-hit wonder. Phrase 2. One of my key achievements this year was. Use this phrase when you want to highlight a standout accomplishment. For example, one of my key achievements this year was leading the successful launch of our new product line. Notice the use of the past tense, was, to indicate a completed achievement. It conveys certainty and, of course, clarity. Phrase 3. I believe I have grown in the area of. Use this to show self-awareness and a willingness to develop. For example, I believe I have grown in the area of team leadership by mentoring junior colleagues. I believe softens the statement slightly, which is very important because it makes you sound reflective rather than boastful. Now let's talk about some language for responding to feedback. Phrase 1. Thank you for the feedback. I appreciate the opportunity to improve. Thank you for the feedback. I appreciate the opportunity to improve. Use this phrase right after your manager points out areas for growth. It signals an open mind and, of course, a positive attitude. In some cultures, receiving feedback can feel uncomfortable. This phrase turns it into a collaborative opportunity. Phrase 2. I understand your perspective and I'd like to work on. Let's say your manager highlights your communication style as an area to refine. You can respond with, I understand your perspective and I'd like to work on more concise emails. The phrase I'd like, short for I would like, is a polite yet proactive term. Phrase 3. Could you provide more details on where I can focus my efforts? Could you provide more details on where I can focus my efforts? This is a great way to dig deeper into feedback. For instance, you might say, could you provide more details on where I can focus my efforts in improving my presentation skills? Asking for specifics shows you take feedback seriously and want clear action points. Now let's take a look at language for setting future objectives. Phrase 1. I'd like to develop my skills in area to contribute more to project or team. I'd like to develop my skills in area to contribute more to project or team. Maybe you want to develop your skills in data analysis to contribute more to the product development team. This phrase ensures you demonstrate your willingness to add value. Contribute emphasizes collaboration and positive impact, which resonates well in a team environment. Phrase 2. My goal for the upcoming quarter is to. My goal for the upcoming quarter is to. This phrase sets a clear timeline and objective. For example, my goal for the upcoming quarter is to increase social media engagement by 20%. Is to smoothly introduces an action, making the statement direct and concise, which is perfect for any professional. Phrase 3. I plan to improve by action so that I can result. I plan to improve by action so that I can result. Here's how it sounds in context. I plan to improve by taking advanced sales courses so that I can handle complex client negotiations. Notice the cause and effect format. Improve by, your method, and so that I can, your intended outcome. Very powerful in all professional environments. The cause and effect format. And finally, let's look at some language for requesting support. Could I receive additional training or resources for? Could I receive additional training or resources for? Use this when you want to appear proactive about filling any skill gaps, like, could I receive additional training or resources for project management software? The modal, could I, is a polite formal way of asking for something. Can I works too, but could I sounds more professional. Phrase 2. I'd appreciate any guidance you can offer in. I'd appreciate any guidance you can offer in. This shows respect for your manager's expertise. You could say, I'd appreciate any guidance you can offer in developing my leadership approach. Using I'd appreciate signals gratitude in advance, which can foster a positive response. Phrase 3. It would be helpful to have regular check-ins to monitor my progress. It would be helpful to have regular check-ins to monitor my progress. Ask for a structured follow-up plan. It would be helpful to have regular check-ins to monitor my progress on our customer satisfaction initiative. This indicates that you're invested in continuous improvement and want measurable milestones. Keep these phrases handy and remember, it's not just what you say, but how you say it. In a moment, we'll look at common errors professionals make with these expressions and how you can easily avoid them. So we'll be back in just a second. Now, let's talk about the pitfalls and how to avoid them so you can really maximize the impact of these new phrases. In a moment, I'll share a bonus tip on how to sound more natural in English during stressful reviews. But first, let's pinpoint the most common errors you need to steer clear of. Common error 1. Being too vague. Sometimes we want to sound humble, but phrases like, I did all right, or "I tried my best" can make it hard for your manager to grasp your real contribution. Instead, specify what you did and how it benefited the team or project. Common error 2. Downplaying strengths. It's easy to underestimate your achievements, especially if you're worried about coming across as arrogant. But if you go too far, people might not recognize the real value you bring. Look at Charlie. He realized he was selling himself short by saying, "I did some marketing tasks." Now he emphasizes real metrics, like, "I helped increase lead generation by 30%. Common error 3. Being overly defensive. When you hear criticism, particularly if you disagree, it's tempting to push back. However, a defensive response can make your manager feel unheard and can turn the conversation negative. Instead, show willingness to learn by saying something like, "I understand your perspective and I'd like to work on." Remember, it's an opportunity to grow. And so some tips for best results. The first one is prepare and practice. Think of it this way. A performance review is like a mini presentation about you. Before the meeting, list your biggest accomplishments with concrete examples. That way, you won't suddenly draw a blank. Tip number 2 is positive body language. Even if you're not 100% confident inside, maintaining a relaxed posture, looking the person in the eye and nodding when appropriate, helps reinforce your words. If your verbal language is strong, but your body language seems anxious, you send mixed messages. And tip number 3 is follow up. After the review, send a brief email summarizing the main points and action items. This helps everyone stay aligned and ensures there's a clear record of your discussion. It also shows you take feedback seriously and are proactive about the next steps. By steering clear of these pitfalls and applying these tips, you'll amplify the power of the phrases we covered earlier. But what if you're still worried about sounding polished in the moment when nerves kick in? Don't fret, we'll wrap up with a final technique you can use to maintain composure and professionalism even under pressure. Let's move on. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of the Business English Podcast. Let's quickly recap what we've covered. You've learned the language tools to self-evaluate effectively, respond gracefully to feedback, set clear future objectives, and ask for support when you need it, all while sounding polished and professional. We also covered some of the most common pitfalls to avoid, like being too vague or defensive, and I gave you practical tips to help you shine during your next performance review. Now, before we sign off, here's my final tip for sounding confident and composed in any high-pressure conversation. Slow down. When you're nervous, it's natural to speak faster, but this can make you sound unsure or rushed. Instead, take a breath and deliberately pace yourself. This gives you time to think, helps you pronounce your phrases clearly, and gives your words more weight. Slow and steady equals confident and professional. If today's episode resonated with you or you'd like to dive deeper into these skills, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter, the 3-Minute Minutes, for more professional resources and tools. You'll get a transcript, bonus tips, and exclusive insights that you won't want to miss. You can find the link in the show notes. Thank you for tuning in to the Business English Podcast. If you found today's episode valuable, I'd love it if you could leave a review or share it with a colleague or friend who might also benefit. And remember, your ability to communicate clearly and confidently in English is a skill that can transform your career one phrase at a time. Until next time, keep practicing, stay sharp, and of course, keep it strictly business.